What if the person you love the most didn't trust you? What if they tested your loyalty in the worst way possible? This is the story of Damian Carter, a wealthy tech mogul living in Las Vegas. Despite his immense success, Damian struggled with deep-seated insecurities, especially when it came to trust. He had married Miriam, a beautiful and intelligent woman, just 6 months ago, and although she had never given him any reason to doubt her, his fears wouldn't let him rest. His paranoia was fueled by a conversation with his friend Tony, who boasted about testing his own wife's loyalty. "You can never be too sure," Tony had said with a mischievous grin. That idea stuck with Damian, and soon he became convinced that he needed to do the same. But what started as a simple test would soon spiral out of control, leading to consequences he never could have imagined. Tony's words echoed in Damian's mind. "You can never be too sure." That single statement planted a dangerous seed of doubt, pushing Damian to take drastic action. He decided to put Miriam to the ultimate test, one that would reveal whether she was truly faithful or just pretending. But how could he do it without her knowing? That's when he came up with a plan. Damian hired Jeffrey, a young, handsome, and charismatic man who had worked small jobs for him before. Jeffrey had the charm that made him naturally attractive to women, and Damian saw him as the perfect candidate to test Miriam's loyalty. His job was simple: get close to Miriam, tempt her, and see if she would fall for him. If she did, Damian would know the truth. But if she remained loyal, then maybe, just maybe, he could finally put his insecurities to rest. Miriam, however, had no idea that she was being tested. When Damian surprised her with a personal driver, she thought nothing of it. She assumed he was just being generous, making her life easier since she didn't know how to drive. To her, Jeffrey was just another employee, polite, professional, and helpful. She treated him with kindness, occasionally chatting with him during drives, and even offering him coffee when they stopped for errands. To Miriam, it was nothing more than basic courtesy. But to Jeffrey, it was the beginning of an opportunity. And to Damian, it was a waiting game, one that would soon take an unexpected turn. As the weeks passed, Jeffrey slowly became more than just a driver to Miriam. Long car rides led to light-hearted conversations, and soon, laughter filled the space between them. Miriam, feeling lonely with Damian constantly buried in work, found comfort in having someone to talk to. She shared little frustrations about her day, spoke about her life before marriage, and occasionally joked about Damian's obsessive work habits. To her, Jeffrey was simply a friendly presence, someone who listened when no one else was around. But Jeffrey began to see things differently. The way Miriam laughed at his jokes, the way she sometimes bought him coffee or tipped him generously, he convinced himself that it meant something more. Maybe she wasn't just being kind. Maybe she actually liked him. The idea took root in his mind, and he started believing that, given the right moment, she might reciprocate his feelings. Meanwhile, Damian was growing restless. He had expected Jeffrey to report back with some kind of proof, something to confirm his worst fears. But day after day, there was nothing. No sign of betrayal, no hints of disloyalty. This only made his paranoia worse. Was Miriam being overly cautious? Was Jeffrey failing to do his job? The lack of results left Damian even more anxious, his mind spiraling with doubt. He needed an answer. And soon, that answer would come, but not in the way he had expected. One evening, after a long day of shopping, Jeffrey pulled the car over on a quiet street instead of driving Miriam straight home. She frowned, confused. "Is something wrong with the car?" she asked. But Jeffrey didn't answer right away. Instead, he unbuckled his seatbelt, stepped out of the front, and slid into the back seat beside her. Miriam's confusion turned to unease. "Jeffrey, what are you doing?" she asked. But before she could react, He leaned in and pressed his lips against hers. For a moment, shock paralyzed her. This wasn't happening. The polite, easygoing driver she had trusted had just crossed an unforgivable line. Then anger exploded inside her. Without hesitation, she shoved him away with all her strength, her face twisting in disgust. "What do you think you're doing?" she shouted, her voice shaking with fury. Jeffrey, realizing his mistake, stammered, "Miriam, I thought—" "You thought what? That I would betray my husband?" Without another word, she slapped him hard across the face, her hand stinging from the force. "You're fired, Jeffrey. I'm telling Damian everything." She reached for her phone, her hands trembling. But before she could dial, Jeffrey grabbed her arm, gently, not forcefully, his face filled with desperation. "Miriam, wait. You need to know the truth," he pleaded. She yanked her arm away, glaring at him. "What truth?" Jeffrey took a deep breath, guilt flashing across his face. "Damian, he set this up. He hired me to test you. He never trusted you." Miriam's heart sank. For a moment, the world around her blurred. "What did you just say?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jeffrey lowered his gaze. "He paid me to tempt you. This was all part of his plan." A wave of betrayal crashed over her, leaving her breathless. Her own husband, the man she loved, the man she had been nothing but faithful to, had doubted her so much that he had staged this cruel test. The hurt in her chest turned to rage. Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't from sadness. They were from the sheer pain of realizing the truth. Damian never truly trusted her, and that hurt more than anything Jeffrey had done. That night, Miriam sat in silence, waiting for Damian to come home. Her heart pounded with a mix of anger and heartbreak. When he finally walked through the door, she didn't hesitate. "You never trusted me," she shouted, her voice trembling with emotion. Damian froze, confusion flashing across his face. "Miriam, what are you talking about?" "I know everything, Damian," she snapped. "I know you hired Jeffrey. I know you set me up like some kind of experiment." His face paled instantly. "Miriam, I don't want to hear it." She cut him off, her eyes burning with unshed tears. "I have been nothing but faithful to you. I loved you. And this is how you repay me? By testing me like I'm some kind of liar waiting to betray you?" Damian took a step forward, desperation in his voice. "Miriam, please, I was just insecure. I let my fears control me. I made a mistake." "A mistake?" She let out a bitter laugh. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is misplacing your keys. What you did was a choice, Damian. You chose to humiliate me. You chose to doubt me. And now, you have to live with the consequences." Damian's chest tightened. "Please, Miriam, I'll do anything to fix this." But she shook her head. "You can't fix trust once it's broken." The finality in her tone sent a cold wave of realization through him. He had ruined everything. The one woman he truly loved, the one person who had never given him a reason to doubt, was now walking away. The next day, Miriam filed for divorce. Damian tried everything to make her stay. Apologies, gifts, promises, but nothing could undo the damage. He had let his insecurities destroy the best thing in his life. And now, he had to live with the regret of knowing he had lost her forever. Months passed, but for Damian, time seemed to stand still. His once thriving world felt empty without Miriam. The mansion that once echoed with laughter now felt cold and lifeless. He buried himself in work, but no amount of success could fill the void she left behind. Every day, regret gnawed at him, reminding him of the mistake that cost him the woman he loved. He had tested her loyalty, only to prove his own unworthiness. Then one evening, fate intervened. Damian was dining alone at a quiet restaurant when his heart nearly stopped. There she was. Miriam sat at a corner table, looking as radiant as ever. But something was different. She looked stronger, more independent, yet the sight of her still made his chest ache. Gathering every ounce of courage, he stood up and slowly approached her table. "Miriam," he whispered, his voice raw with emotion. She looked up, her eyes widening slightly. For a moment, silence hung between them. He could see the pain lingering in her gaze, but she didn't look away. "I haven't been the same since you left," Damian admitted, his voice cracking. "I was wrong, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to know, I still love you." Miriam exhaled softly, setting down her fork. "Damian," she hesitated, searching his face. "You broke my heart." "I know." He nodded, his eyes filled with regret. "And if there's any chance, even the smallest chance, that we can try again, I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I trust you." She studied him for a long moment. Part of her wanted to walk away, to remind him that trust once shattered is never the same. But another part, one she had tried to silence, knew the truth. She still loved him. Finally, she reached out and placed her hand over his. "Maybe we can try," she said softly. "But trust isn't rebuilt overnight, Damian." A hopeful smile tugged at his lips. "I know. I'll take it one step at a time, for as long as it takes." And so, with cautious hearts, they began the slow journey of rebuilding what had once been broken. One step, one moment, and one act of trust at a time. Trust is the foundation of love. Without it, even the strongest relationships can crumble. Damian learned this the hard way. His insecurities led him to test Miriam, only to realize too late that true love isn't something you prove with tricks or traps. It's something you believe in wholeheartedly. Testing loyalty can break everything, and once trust is shattered, rebuilding it is never easy. What would you do if your partner tested your loyalty? Would you forgive them or walk away? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.